when you get out of your comfort zone, that's when you discover the real you.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's when you discover what you're capable of, because you do that. You get a little scared.
Oh, yeah.
Now you're the water went out and you're out, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
You got your pants down. Now you have to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
You have to figure it out. So necessity level comes up,
Mm-hmm.
and boom, you just really see what you can do and that you're capable of. I'm Derek Vickers, and you're watching Entrepreneur Unleashed.
Welcome back to another episode of Entrepreneur Unleashed. Joining me in the studio today is Derek Vickers. My name is Edward Collins, and I'm your host. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I'm a father. I'm a husband. But ultimately, I've been on a journey for the past 25 years, building and scaling my own businesses and helping other business owners to do the exact same thing. And I've created Entrepreneur Unleashed for you, to give you an opportunity to learn vicariously through the trials and triumphs of others who have been through it. Now, today in the studio, we're going to be talking with Derek Vickers. He's going to be sharing his experience, where he's come from, where he's going to, and I can't wait to get started, so I'm not going to wait anymore. Derek, thank you so much for being here today.
Absolutely, Edward. It's been a great so far. I haven't been here that long yet, but I know it's going to be a great podcast, and I'm interested to dive in here and hopefully provide some value to your listeners.
100%. In order to do that, though, I think let's give them a little bit of context. Give us a 90-second version of where you are right now in your business and why they should be even interested in learning about you.
Yeah, so I'm the CEO of Victory Real Estate Group. We own and operate almost 2,000 lots of mobile home parks in the Southeast.
Okay.
And so we've built that up. We didn't buy our first property until September of 2020. So we bought 38 communities in that time.
Oh my goodness.
It was when COVID was happening, and for the first year, I was still working, quote unquote, a full-time job at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was able to scale to 1,000 lots before I even left the 9-to-5 job.
Wow.
And so we've grown this business and created this little monster, so to speak.
Really.
It's an actual business now.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of things that led up to that. So people say, "Oh, Derek, you blew up so fast." Well, hold up. There's a lot of work that went into that. A lot of trials and tribulations that you went through, a lot of ups and downs, as a business owner, just stuff happens.
Mm-hmm.
And, looking to scale that up even more. So it's been an exciting few years here, and we're looking to keep growing.
Wonderful. Now, let's talk about that journey then, because again, a lot of times you hear that whole overnight success that was like 25 years in the making, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about that journey. Like, you obviously weren't always this entrepreneur that you are today.
Right.
Like, where did you actually get your start?
Yeah, so I got my start when I'll shorten this up a little bit, but we can talk about it. It may lead off into some other past. So I went to college.
Okay.
Didn't finish college.
Okay.
I went to get an accounting degree.
Well, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so the only reason I chose that, because I heard accountants made a lot of money. That was the only reason.
They definitely can.
They can. And so I did that, didn't finish school. That's, for other reasons we may or may not get into here. So I moved back to Virginia.
Okay. Where were you going to college at that point?
Coastal Carolina. In
Okay.
South Carolina.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you moved back to Virginia, and what happened?
Moved back to Virginia and, started hanging out with the wrong people again, partying too much, going down the wrong path. And so I was there for a couple of years from 2010 to 2012. And then in 2012, I had a buddy that I went to college with. He's like, "Hey, this is in Virginia," but he was living in Orlando, Florida. So he was like, "Hey, Derek, why don't you move down to Florida? I'm living by myself. Got a condo. You don't have to pay me rent until you find a job." And I'm like, "Okay, let's do it." So 2 weeks later, I was in Florida.
Wow.
And I came down with a $300 tax return.
Okay.
It was all the money I had.
Mm-hmm.
And I got a commission-only insurance sales position.
Okay.
So, is right. Is right. And so I started doing that and just getting my teeth kicked in every day. I was cold calling.
Okay.
Like, I didn't have any relationships. He was the only person I knew in Florida. So I'm cold calling businesses door to door.
Interesting.
So if anybody's done that,
Okay.
that's a different gauntlet. I think everybody should have to go through at some point because you get thick skin and all kinds of other things.
Yeah, sharpening the saw when it comes to sales is important because everything in life is sales, right? You're always going to be selling something. You're selling yourself, a service, or a product, and no matter what you're doing. So if you can develop those sales skills, it definitely serves you long term. Now, you said something that I do want to explore a little bit because I was away last week. I was in Cancun. I was surrounded by a ton of different business owners, and we were engaged in like this mastermind environment, and we were talking a lot about mindset. And you said something that was interesting to me. You said I was on the wrong path, right? Right. And then you found a new path because you were exposed to it. I think it's important to recognize though that it's hard to know you're on the wrong path while you're on it, right? You actually need perspective. You need to be able to see a variation or an alternative. So what was it that gave you the understanding that you were on the wrong path that motivated you to get off of it? Like, was there anything particular that you became aware of that was alternate to what you were currently doing?
So and that's a great question because I've never been asked that before, but it wasn't like something that I read. Okay. It wasn't. I always had this like inner knowingness that even when I was doing bad things, I knew I was.
Yeah,
I knew I was, but I always knew that I was going to end up making something of myself. I always knew that I was going to stop doing those things at one point. So it was just like this. It was just this weird inner knowingness that I had that like kept me. And it was just I always knew that. Okay. And it wasn't really any book or anything. I did start reading books and educating myself, but I always had that awareness of what I was doing, even though the things I was doing were not good things, going down just an awful path. Okay. But I had that awareness.
Interesting. Now, so you cut your teeth door to door. I mean, I had a very similar experience when I was younger. So my first real sales job I got when I was 13 years old. I started selling door-to-door newspaper subscriptions. So I totally get the whole door-to-door thing and how, like, if you can get through that and survive it, it's, like, amazing because you do develop thick skin. You recognize that you may not recognize it, but if you're fortunate enough to recognize it, that you can divorce yourself from the outcome and marry yourself to the process. Right. Just do it regardless of what the outcome is, because eventually the outcome comes.
For sure.
So you're cutting your teeth doing that. What was the transition point then for you? What was the next step that you took?
Yeah. So are you talking in the insurance business?
In the insurance. Exactly.
Yeah. So I was doing that. In my first year, I made $18,000. Woohoo!
Okay.
I don't know how I lived off that.
Yeah. But you managed.
But I managed, right? Yeah. And so I think it was probably 3 years in. Okay. I had an instance where I was I had an SUV that I drove, and I went to the gas station. Mm-hmm. I needed gas to go prospect that day. I looked at my bank account. I had less than $5 in my bank account. I had a credit card that was virtually maxed out from college. Had a $1,000 limit on it, Bank of America card, and I looked and I had $3 of credit left on that. So I had to put a couple of dollars on the debit card for gas and a couple of dollars on the credit card for gas to go prospect that week. And mind you, my rent was due, my $350 rent, because I had to start paying rent at some point. And didn't have the money to do that. And so I had to call. I called and asked my grandmother for $50. Wow. And so when I did that, that really was like, I sat in my car after I called her, and I'm like, dude, what am I doing? Like, I'm 24 years old, 25 years old, whatever I was at this point. And I'm like, I'm calling my grandmother for $50 so I can get gas. And I was taking off on Fridays, taking off early because I was a 1099. I thought I was cool that I could take off on Fridays because you could, but not really.
Right.
And then I went home that night. And I called, so my wife was, my now wife, she was still in Virginia. I called her looking for sympathy. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is going terrible. I'm not making any money. And she's like, dude, you need to like suck it up. She called me a loser, but she used another word before. Effing loser.
I know where you're going. Yeah. Okay.
She's like, my friend that works at Lowe's makes more money than you do.
Wow.
And that was my wife.
Yeah.
Well, she's now my wife. And so the only person that I thought in the world that would give me sympathy punched me in the face.
Yeah. But that's what you needed, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally needed that. And that is when I started really diving into the sales, personal development, reading more books, listening to audio, filling my life with positivity. I started doing a lot of that stuff when I moved to Florida, but that was really the point where it was like, okay, I can't take off Fridays anymore. I have to actually work until businesses close and actually prospect. And that's when I started to see a turn in that insurance business.
In the thousands of business owners that I've had conversations with over the course of my 25 years, I can absolutely say that the one unifying characteristic of those who are most successful is that they've hit a rock bottom.
Yeah.
And they've learned how to come back from that.
Right.
So you hit your rock bottom. It was the punch in the face that just said, hey, listen, I need to wake up. You then made a decision to dive into development, more personal development. What gave you the inspiration for that to be the outlet?
Yeah, so I was actually reading some more spiritual books and things when I moved to Florida, because the problems I had in Virginia, I was like, I'm moving to Florida. That was the reason I moved to Florida, to get away from that stuff. Okay. And so I wanted to start working on myself in various ways. Okay. And so, I just went to the bookstore and started finding books on sales. I started searching on YouTube for books and things on sales, and then I started reading them. I read Think and Grow Rich, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the same books that everyone's
Napoleon
read.
Hill's amazing.
Yeah.
Robert Kiyosaki is amazing.
Yeah.
The interesting thing I find is that most business owners don't actually do that. They literally will settle for the life they have, rather than sacrifice the life they have for the life they want. You made a decision to invest in yourself, to develop, to learn. That's what distinguishes you from the rest, because the reality is so many will not do that.
Yeah.
In fact, I heard this interesting statistic. It said that if you can invest 100 hours into any subject, which is really only about 18, 20 minutes a day.
Yeah.
If you can invest 100 hours into anything, you will be not better than 95% of the rest of the world in that thing.
Wow.
Most people won't do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
To be part of the 5%. Like, for instance, if you wanted to be a guitar player and you just invested 100 hours, 20 minutes a day, you'll be better than 95% of the world at playing guitar. Doesn't mean you'll be perfect. Doesn't mean you'll be excellent.
Right.
But if you do that thing, it actually changes. And it's the action. It's the repetitiveness. It's the consistency by which you say, I'm dedicated to this.
Yeah.
I'm going to use discipline as my tool, my resource, my guide, and I'll just do it. And you did that. Now, you learned all these things. You started to develop yourself. What was the next step for you professionally?
Yeah, so I actually got up into a management role.
Okay.
Because I was extremely successful. I was one of the top salespeople in the state for that particular insurance company. So I started building a team.
Oh, okay.
And so I won tons of awards doing that. And then I became sort of a regional manager where I acquired an office. And you're a glorified entrepreneur at that point, because I think we were talking about this on a call. Like, I didn't own that business.
Right.
So I was building that business, investing everything that I had with no equity. Mm-hmm. So I couldn't just go pitch that business as I got into the real estate game. And so that was my next step. It was actually, but that, I will say, with that being said, Edward, is that, yes, there were a lot of bad things about that I learned, but I had 100 salespeople. Yeah, 100 commissioned salespeople under me. So imagine the drama.
Oh, goodness!
Somebody stole my deal. Somebody, called the client I was working on, and so you're dealing with that. Mm-hmm. And also, I had to my biggest thing I had to do at that point. I was in recruiting. So think about this: I had to recruit people that either didn't have a job, didn't have any money, or had another job making 50, 60, 70 grand a year to come over to a job with no benefits, no guarantees, no leads, no nothing. And that was more my job then. So I had to convince people to come and do that. And we ended up being, top in the company in recruiting. We won tons of awards and things, but that was my next step in, growing as a leader. And actually understanding how to run and budget a business at that point.
But it wasn't your business then. No. At that point, it was still, you were building it for someone else. What gave you the thought process of doing something on your own? Like what was it? What was the trigger point? Because usually it's like the straw that breaks the camel's back. Like, what was that for you?
Yeah, so it was when, and the other crazy thing about this business, and so it was D. Vickers and Associates, my entity. It would be paid that.
Yep.
And then I paid for everything else.
So
so understanding that was something, and then corporate would hire, people that are above me. They're W-2 employees. They had never been in the gauntlet. They had never made a sales call. They had never, sat in the freaking office and recruited people. They didn't have to worry about the expenses. And they're trying to tell me what to do. They're trying to say that we're number one in everything.
Yeah.
And you're like, hey, Derek, you need to do this better. I'm like, what the heck do you know?
Right.
Like, screw you.
I mean, that's the whole issue with academics, though, too. I mean, at the end of the day, you go to university and you're being taught by someone who's never done it. Same thing happens in corporate America. A lot of the corporate environment is all about the academics of it. Don't get me wrong. There's still a significant amount of value in understanding certain things.
Right.
But the practical application of knowledge is totally different than the classroom application of it, right? So that was the thing that triggered it for you?
Yeah, it was that, and then realizing, so I had been writing down, I write my goals in the morning and every night. And I was writing down these massive numbers, and I'm like, I'm thinking to myself, am I in the right vehicle to do that?
Okay.
And so I started to question that.
Let's explore that. Because that's also a key point.
For sure.
Understanding where you're deriving your revenue from.
Right.
Is that the ideal one for you? Now, it could be ideal for someone.
For sure.
You have to figure out what your zone of genius is and how to capitalize on that.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit more. You started to have that insight. What happened next?
Yeah, so I started to have that insight where it was like, okay, these goals that I'm writing down, you're not going to be able to do this making commissions all the time. It's just not going to happen. And I started to talk to, I wanted to start linking up with higher up people in this business that had been doing it and were seemingly successful. And I started talking to them. I'm like, and this was after I studied Robert Kiyosaki, so I knew about investing in assets and things and, businesses that cash flow. And so I started talking to these guys.
Okay.
And none of these guys had any idea about doing that. They were fine because they got, they were making $1 million a year in a salary. So you're getting crushed by the IRS. And they're fine. And none of them really had any bigger goals. I'm like, I don't want to be these guys. This is not who I wanted to be, because I would meet with these guys and be excited. I'm like, hey, I want to learn what he's investing in. I want to learn how he's growing his wealth. I want to learn how they're doing these things. And, I met with them, and then it was like, okay, and these guys are, look, I don't have a problem with drinking. I don't drink, but these guys are, getting plastered at the bar at a corporate event. And I'm like, that's not me and what I want to do. And so all those things combined led me to okay, I need to get out of this. And again, I was reading those books, so I knew that, and I learned from Grant Cardone too, that I always had this, how do these guys create $100 million of wealth, $1 billion worth of wealth? I always thought, I thought people got paid a W-2, but the guy who's worth $100 million does not have a W-2 that says $100 million.
Definitely not.
And so I learned from him that hey, investing in assets is how these guys create wealth. And so in 2015, 2016, when I learned that, it was like, okay, this is the route I need to go. Okay. I need to figure out a way to weasel my way into that space. And figured out all that combined helped me realize that, like, hey, the insurance gig is not your path.
Right.
Yeah.
When you looked at the alternative, then you started understanding asset acquisition. Like,
right.
What was your first asset that you went after?
So it's interesting. So it was 2020.
Okay.
And I had been looking at underwriting like multifamily deals, but I never really sent in an LOI. I never sent a contract or had anything under contract. So I was looking at underwriting and learning all that. Okay. So 2020, COVID happened. Mm-hmm. We know what happened in COVID. Look, Florida was relatively open the whole time, but it was shut down. Mm-hmm. And so my insurance business's revenue was just cut.
Non-existent at that point, right?
I mean, you could call and talk to businesses, but nobody's freaking buying. Everybody's terrified. They're watching the news and everything's going crazy. Mm-hmm. I'm like, all right, I got to get going. Mm-hmm. And so I just did what I knew how to do best. I got a list of, first I was looking at assets because I'd always looked at multifamily. I had a friend who was investing in mobile home parks.
Oh, okay.
And he was like, hey, you should look at this asset class. I'm like, okay, I'll take a look at it. And what I loved about it is that, tenants own their own homes and things like that. And there was a little smaller barrier to entry than multifamily because I didn't want to buy a duplex. I wanted to get some scale. And so I fell in love with the asset class. Okay. And so I found a list. It's like when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. Exactly. But so this wasn't a teacher, though. It was just a list that appeared of all the mobile home parks in Florida. So I went and searched online, and boom, I found it.
You found it. Okay.
So I'm like, all right, no excuses now. So I started calling, and sounded like an idiot on the phone. I could cold call. And the funny thing about this, Edward, I was like, oh my gosh, this is heaven because I'm in the insurance business. You're a business owner. So I'm calling you and saying, hey, Edward, let me sell you something.
Exactly.
Now you're a property owner. And I'm like, hey, I want to buy your property.
Right.
So that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And so I'd actually met this guy through my friend the guy that lived like 5 or 10 minutes down the road from me. He had invested in mobile home parks. So he sort of knew the asset class.
Okay.
And so I got a meeting set up with this guy, and I started telling him, what I was looking to do. I started showing him some deals that I was finding. What do you think? Here's my underwriting. Is it good? Is it bad? What am I missing? And he taught me a little bit about the business.
Okay. And
so him and I hit it off and developed a pretty good relationship. Okay. And so this was going into August and September of 2020. As I was looking at, and in that time too, I was driving all the mobile home parks in Florida, going and meeting with owners in the strangest places you would never even think of. And so one day out of the blue, he called me and was like, hey, I had this deal under contract. And I knew because he had told me he did. And he's like, my operating partner backed out. We're closing in 5 days. Do you want in? And I'm like, I'll call you back. I told him I'd call him back tomorrow, but I actually ended up calling him back in like 5 minutes. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? Freaking call him back. You want to get in on the deal.
Okay.
So I got in on the deal. I got in that first deal with no money. Mm-hmm. And my job was to do all the dirty work. And I tell people in my, in some of my programs and stuff, it's like, just because you don't have money doesn't mean you can't get into these deals because there's a lot of people with money that don't want to go hang a notice on the door.
Yeah.
And I don't blame them.
When I talk about deal acquisition with our mentees, we talk about it as a three-legged stool.
Yeah.
You have capital, you have sweat, and you have time.
Totally.
And in any deal, you figure out how to lean on one of the legs.
Correct.
Like maybe you have some money, you can put it into a deal. Maybe you have some sweat equity that you can put into the deal. Maybe you have some time, focus, and attention that you can put into the deal.
Right.
But those are the three things that typically make a deal work. You, at that point, had the ability to put both time and sweat.
Time and sweat, baby.
Time and sweat. I love it. When you look at that deal, talk a little bit about what that looked like. Because you were coming in, obviously, as pretty much last minute. You weren't part of the initial negotiations or anything. But, what made that deal attractive to you? Beyond, obviously, your friend telling you about it and you were ready. What was it about it?
Yeah, so one of the things that it was an opportunity for I knew I was committed to getting into this business.
Okay.
So one, it was a path for me to get into this business.
Okay.
And two, to learn the operations to learn how a mobile home park operates, the permits you need, the processes that you need to do. How do you evict someone? How do you, manage the books? All this stuff I didn't know. And, we had 5 days of closing. So typically you get, 30, 45 days of due diligence. So there were lots of skeletons in the closet because they didn't do due diligence.
Right.
And so I think it was that and getting the opportunity to learn the business and, building good relationships with these guys who had capital to, maybe for future deals. Right.
Okay.
And so it was really those three things.
Okay.
And obviously the deal was, I thought it could be a profitable deal as well. And there was some value add. There was a heavy value add property.
Yeah. Okay.
The health department in this particular county.
Okay.
They would take their new employees to this park as an example of the worst of the worst of what not to do. Not to do.
Okay. The poster child.
The poster child of what not to do.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was rough.
But there was potential there.
There was potential.
The bones were good.
The bones were good.
Okay.
If any normal person looked at it, they'd be like,
no way.
Dude, why are you buying that?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Wait, how long did it take you to turn that property around?
So we found out some really cool things about the market and parks in this particular deal, but it took us. We refinanced in July of 21.
Okay.
So it was like 8 months. Yeah. 8 months.
Yeah.
So it was pretty fast.
Yeah.
We thought it was going to take us over a year, but we refinanced. We bought it for $425K. We put $75,000 of CapEx in the deal.
That's it. Okay.
That's it.
Okay.
And then we reappraised for 1.75.
Whoa! Wait! You can't gloss over that.
Yeah.
That's huge. That's a great upside potential.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, what did you do with the capital?
Put it right back in some other deals we had under contract. Every single bit of it. Every single bit of it. We got it back, and boom, it was gone. I think we were closing on a portfolio of 5 parks a few weeks after that. So, got the distribution, gone.
I love it. I refer to that as compound asset acquisition.
Yeah.
Utilizing the resources of one asset in order to acquire more.
Yeah.
And then 2 assets to acquire 4. And then 4 assets to acquire 12.
And just keep going.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
When you look at that journey then, that was your kickoff.
Yeah.
Those 8 months was definitely a learning experience for you. What was the most valuable thing you learned in those 8 months?
Yeah, I think many things.
I'm sure.
But I think just generally how to operate a mobile home park.
Okay.
And it gave me more business skills and also, in hiring people and understanding, don't trust the words of everybody that they say. They need to show you. Same with contractors. Same with bookkeepers and people that are helping you do those things. And this just came to mind, so not to kind of jump around, but one of the things I learned is that you can do this. Like, you can get into deals, you can make it happen. You don't need money. You just have to be willing to add some value in whatever place that is. There's 3 buckets that you talked about. If you can bring some sort of value there, it's you can get into that. And I also learned that, like, you can go bigger.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I always knew I could, but until you actually do it, it's like, oh, okay. It just opened my world up to a whole different stratosphere of thoughts, opportunities. I'm like, oh, okay, what can I do now?
Yeah, when you put yourself into it, you learn, right?
Yeah.
I was talking with someone recently, we were talking about the fact that she's, like, hesitant to get started. And I'm like, listen, I know you're fearful, but confidence will come with competence.
That's right.
But the only way you get competence is by earning it, right?
Right.
You have to put in the reps. You have to do the things. You have to get into the mud, if you will. You have to be in the poster child of bad in order to learn how to make it good, right? But once you develop those skills earned through time, you can have the confidence to move on to a bigger and better thing after that.
Yeah, totally.
So you already had some deals in the pipeline while this 8 months was going on.
Oh,
right?
yeah, we had closed many other deals in between that.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about what your process is for identifying deals in general. Like, do you have a methodology by which you go through analyzing a deal, understanding the good, the bad, the ugly, all that stuff?
Yeah, so there's many different factors into this, but we look at deals, and this has changed a little bit, but at that point we were looking at deals because we found this little niche of the market of deals that no one wanted to buy, that the pundits in this industry were teaching people not to buy.
Okay.
So all the deals we bought, if you took, mobile home X, Y, and Z course, they would be like, do not buy this kind of deal.
Okay.
And so we were looking for those deals.
It's blue ocean.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Because we found out in that first really nasty deal that we just talked about that you could actually turn these around because there was a lot of vacant homes. You can actually sell those off and bring them up to market lot rent, which increases the value. Because mom and pop, when they own these parks, they don't take care of them. They don't extract all the value out of them. It's just like a business or whatever. And so we were looking for that. We were looking for deals that had all park-owned homes, which is meaning for your audience, if they don't know, that's when the owner of the park owns the trailers.
Oh, okay.
Right? Okay. And then so we were looking for opportunities of that because we knew that we could do what I talked about before.
Right.
So that we were looking in good markets.
So I just want to make sure I'm understanding.
Ahead.
So as a park-owned home,
yeah, the
owner of the land also owns the improvements on the land, which are trailers here. They're semi-improvements because they're mobile.
Yeah.
And you were talking about some of them being vacant. When you're saying selling them off, you're talking about liquidating that and leaving the space open for someone else to bring their property onto it, or are you talking about building new or acquiring new mobile properties?
No, so this is where we found like the little niche because these vacant ones that were there were in utter disrepair.
Right, so those are gone.
No.
Oh, there's value there.
No, because if they're gone, you have to pay $6,000 to demo it, bring in a new house, which is $50,000 or $60,000.
Okay.
You have to pay to get the house moved there, which is another $10,000 or $15,000.
Okay.
And then you have to sell the new house, and plus all that capital up front from doing that. So what we did is that we would take these homes that were in terrible shape, and we would sell them as a handyman special.
Oh.
Okay. So I would sell them for like $500. We'd sell them for $500. Nothing.
Okay.
And then we would give them to people and give them free lot rent until they came in and fixed up the house.
Interesting.
So we were getting virtually a brand new home that looked better. We had requirements for them to do that with no capital out of pocket.
Interesting.
Because most people in this business, Edward, they think if it's a terrible looking home, like the parks I drove through yesterday in Fort Lauderdale, if anybody drove through there, they'd be like, oh my gosh, we need to bulldoze all these vacant homes. I'm like, no, because you're in a strong market. You can sell that. Give the person 4 months of free lot rent. Who cares?
As long as they're bringing the property value up.
They're bringing the property value up. It's good for them because, some guys, they have a cousin that does plumbing and somebody else that does roofing, so they can actually probably get the job done for cheaper than you or I could.
Right.
Because we don't, I can screw in a light bulb and that's about it. And, you would be surprised the market for people that want to do that.
Wow.
And we learned that through doing test ads.
You've essentially created forced appreciation with someone else doing it for you.
In a sense, yeah. I never thought of it that way.
That's literally what it is, right? Because they're bringing the property up to market value on your behalf.
Right.
Wow, that's genius. I love that.
Yeah.
Because then you can essentially over time you gentrify, if you will.
Correct.
The park.
Right.
You bring it up. You're able to then start investing a little bit more into landscaping and all the amenities of the park. I love this idea.
Yeah.
When you look at this journey, then you've been doing this now for 3 years.
Yeah.
And you're continuing to expand, right? You're continuing to build more and more, acquire more and more properties.
Right.
Do you have a goal in mind with regard to what you want to accomplish each year? Like, do you start the year out 2023? I'm going to acquire 22 new parcels of property, et cetera? Like what's that process like?
Yeah, so I guess the next step is that I want 20,000 lots is the goal.
That's the goal.
It will get to, and we'll have to, we've had to change our business strategy up because we're not going to be able to just buy onesies and twosies to do that.
Yeah.
We're going to have to, eat another company that
acquire
owns
a portfolio.
4,000 lots.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's the idea where we want to get to. And I say we can do that in 3 to 4 years is what I'm looking at.
Okay.
And,
I like it.
Yeah. Yeah,
like it.
And that's where we'll get to. And look, you'll learn about me. Like I don't, that's why I see this studio in here, and I come in here and I'm like, okay, dude, this is what I got to do now. Because I've never been like a just half-ass it kind of guy.
No, go all in.
It's just all in.
All in.
I even went in all in on the bad things.
Yeah,
so
I saw. That's why we could be friends. I mean,
Yeah.
At the end of the day, like. I love surrounding myself with like A players, people who are really interested in taking their life and their business to the next level. I mean, I called my business Up Level Entrepreneur for a reason.
Yeah.
The goal here is, what is the next level for you? Is the next level for you more property, or are you doing more than that? Like you're, from what I understand, you're actually teaching other people how to do this stuff now too, right?
Yeah.
Like tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and so I've started, I had this cognition, 8 months ago.
Okay.
That I'm like, Derek, you're an idiot. Like you've been building this portfolio, all these crazy things have happened, and you're not posting it on social media because with the goals you write down every morning, I'm having this conversation with myself. Like the only way you're going to do that is to build a personal brand that's massive.
Yeah.
And so I had that cognition. I'm like, oh my gosh, like I've just been so dumb for 2 years, but we're not going to, harp on that. We're going to start doing it now.
Yep.
So started posting content and things, and people started asking me questions. And so we're building out and doing a webinar this week, but we're building out a mentorship program.
Okay.
I've already got some people piloting in it where I'm helping them close their deals. So people don't. So typically, when I first started looking into the real estate business, I didn't have the money. I didn't know what the hell to do. I didn't know any attorneys. I didn't know the process. But I was always good at cold calling and finding deals. So there's like people out there that will do that, but they don't have the back end infrastructure to close the deal.
Right.
And so what these mentees have done is that they can bring us a deal, and we can provide step 1 through 5 for them. They get a piece of it, right? They still get to get started and involved in the business.
Oh yeah,
and they get to learn it. So it's kind of a smaller version of what I did. But also offering that to other people. And we're also doing, one-on-one coaching and things like that. But I think the real value is going to be provided in what I talked about before in helping someone close their first deal. Hey, we're going to show you the process. We're going to give you access to all of our attorneys, lenders, because, people are intimidated about banks, but after you learn, like the banks are in business to lend money.
Exactly.
They're pitching you.
Exactly.
I used to think that I was pitching the bank. It's totally not true.
It's all mindset shifting.
Yeah.
I mean, your journey and my journey are very similar. Like I built all of my businesses pretty much without much word of mouth. It's been handshaking and a lot of sweat equity involved. And it's only relatively recently that I started getting involved in social media because I got to a point where I really do want to teach other people how to do it. And I figured, just like you, I need to build that personal brand. I need to get out and let people know who I am and what I've done so that I can basically give them an opportunity to learn vicariously through that experience, right? It's one of the reasons why I created Entrepreneur Unleashed, is to create an ecosystem that business owners, that entrepreneurs can learn vicariously through others. And what you're doing within your ecosystem is the exact same thing.
Right.
You're essentially saying, okay, this is what I've done. This is how I've done it. Would you like to come along?
Right.
I love it.
Yeah.
Now, what does that evolution look like for you? Like, where do you see that portion of your business enterprise going over the course of the next 2 years or so?
Yeah. So it's a good question. And so what I see it morphing into, and it will morph into, because I think the cool thing about doing something like this, and it's symbiotic to what you're already doing, like, when I'm on the property, I just film now.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the same thing. I just film.
Yeah.
is that I think it can branch off into all kinds of other things.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had people reach out to me now that like, hey, we want to invest with you, Derek. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So maybe I should be doing something out and getting, retail investors to invest in this. And so I see this business morphing into that.
Oh, yeah. It could evolve into a syndication environment. It could evolve this way and that way.
Correct.
I do the same thing. I mean, when you look at it, my focus, especially over the course of the past year and a half now, is I'm a media company that just happens to do all these other things. I'm a media company that just happens to have a wealth management firm attachment. I'm a media company that has an accounting firm attachment. I'm a media company that has a fractional CFO company attachment.
Yeah.
A media company that coaches business owners as well.
Right.
But media company first, because in order to build that brand, people need to become aware of who you are and what you're doing.
Right.
So yes, just pull out the camera, film yourself, just document.
Yeah.
It's not about, you don't have to spend a lot of time trying to develop the content.
Right.
Literally just document what you're doing. If you're in the journey, just document the journey.
Right.
I love it.
Yeah.
One of the things I really like to do with the guests that come on here is I like to engage in a thought exercise.
Okay.
If you wouldn't mind, would you come down that path with
Let's
me?
do it.
Okay. I'd love you to imagine for the moment that you have the ability to go back in time, okay? And you can basically visit with a former version of yourself, like an earlier version of yourself. And you can share one piece of practical wisdom for them. What I'd love to know is, who do you go back to visit? Meaning, what age were you? What was going on in your life? And what is it that you would share with that version, that younger version of Derek?
Wow, it's a great question. I would probably go back to the 17, 18-year-old Derek.
Okay.
And for the simple fact, it was because before I got really messed up into partying and things like that, it was before that really got bad. And, I had a friend that was actually started doing network marketing.
Oh, okay.
And he pulled me into the business.
Okay.
So, and he's actually got multiple businesses now, a really successful guy. And I would tell myself that, hey, man, like, this is an opportunity for you.
Mm-hmm.
Because I didn't actually get on my journey until I was, 24 years old, because I was messed up in this other stuff. But he actually started his journey when he was 18. And I would have been like, you don't need to go to college. You need to just start doing something hard that you can build actual skills that you can do and use throughout your life. Because then, as I told you before, I still had that thing in my head that said, hey, you're going to make something of yourself in one way, shape, or form.
Right.
And even when I was a kid, I had that. And so I would tell that 18-year-old Derek those things like, hey, look, this is an opportunity for you to build skills, right? Don't take the path. Like, I just wanted to go to college to say I went to college because everyone else was going to college. And so I would tell that Derek, because that Derek too was not like the rebellious entrepreneurial Derek that I am now. So I was really like, I had to fit in. And I would tell, myself, you don't need to fit in. Like, if you're running around and acting like everyone else and going down the path that everyone else has, you're going to get what everyone else has.
Yeah.
And it's typically, unhappiness and all the other things that come with that. And I would tell myself to do that and just go big in what you do. Because I get on YouTube and this kid's 20 years old. He's making $50 million and something.
Yeah.
He's got a $100 million business portfolio or something. And I'm like,
Yeah. You sit back and you realize that in order to have the life that most will never, you have to be willing to do the things that most won't.
You do.
Right? It sounds very, very simple. And because it sounds so simple, most people gloss over it.
Right.
Like, Edward, it could be Derek, it could be, doesn't matter. Like, it couldn't be that simple.
Right.
But in reality, it is.
Yeah.
You just have to be willing to sacrifice the life you have in order to get the life you want.
Right.
Most people won't do that.
They won't.
That's why most people end up with what most people have.
Right.
I love that. Now, there's a second part to this thought journey, and that's, I'd love you to imagine for a moment that a future version of Derek has now come back in this moment that we're in right now, standing right next to us, and he's going to share something, a piece of practical wisdom with you now in this moment. what does he share with you?
Yeah, and the interesting thing is I've had sort of this similar question conversations with myself now. So I think back, I was talking to someone the other day, and they asked me, what would you do differently then? And I'm like, well, I didn't know what I didn't know, right? So I was trying to figure out, like, same thing, in 10 years, what would that 10-year self be telling you now that you didn't know?
Oh, yeah.
And so I don't think I'm aware of that thing yet.
Okay.
Because, like, I think I was at a conference one time, and there was a guy speaking, and he's talking about building a personal brand and all this stuff. And I think it was at the 10X Growth Conference Grant had here like 3 or 4 years ago, the big one in the Marlins, the Marlins Stadium. And I forget who it was talking about it, but I just didn't hear it at that point. Like, oh, you need to build. I literally like, oh, this guy's speech sucks. But now I've heard the same guy talk about stuff, and I'm like, okay, he's freaking right.
Right.
And I just didn't hear it at that time. And so I wonder this particular thing all the time. Like, I don't think I know exactly what that person would tell me yet. And I need to find that out. But I do think if I had to say something, it would be sort of the same thing. Go bigger.
Go bigger.
Go bigger. What are you apprehensive to do now that we know that thing is going to take you to the next level?
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes we don't do it. And then once we get to that 5 or 10 year self, we realize, oh, I should have did that. Same, it happened to me in the insurance business. 4 or 5 years in, I'm like, man, I should have started my own. I got the inkling to go start my own brokerage, but I didn't do it. But 5 years later, Derek was like, oh, you should have freaking did that. Because now you would have had that business too, and you could have just hired someone to run it and, still build the real estate portfolio. Yeah.
I heard someone say this recently, and it stuck with me a bit. They said that the comfort zone is the ingredient for mediocrity. Because if you stay in the comfort zone, that's all you'll ever have. You have to stretch beyond your comfort zone. You have to do the things that make you uncomfortable. Because the things of value and the things most typically value are on the other side of caution, right?
Absolutely.
And you have to be willing to do it. Now, I'm not saying jump off a cliff without a parachute,
right?
But find a method. Find a method that says, let me stretch, let me get beyond. And you also said something I don't want to gloss over too much as well. There's a difference between the things we don't know yet and the things we do know that just aren't true, right? Because Epictetus, I'm a big Stoic. I believe in philosophy. Epictetus says that it's impossible to teach a man something he believes he already knows. Right?
Yeah.
You get so set in our ways, like I have. I know I've been through this myself. I've been in circumstances where I believe I know it. I know this inside and out, but I was wrong. And it took someone outside of myself to help me understand how it was wrong. But you have to be willing to engage in those types of conversations. And it sounds like you've had an amazing job doing that.
Yeah, and I think you're 100% right about that. The biggest barrier to someone learning something is thinking you already know.
Oh, yeah.
And, one of the things you said I wanted to touch on about the comfort zone thing. Like, when you get out of your comfort zone, that's when you discover the real you. Like, that's when you discover what you're capable of, because you do that. You get a little scared.
Oh, yeah.
Now you're the water went out and you're out, right?
Oh, yeah.
You got your pants down. Now you have to figure it out. You have to figure it out. So necessity level comes up, and boom, you just really see what you can do and that you're capable of. And I know there's, I'm glad you asked me this question, because it's like, okay, I know there's things that in order to get to that goal that I write down every morning that I need to be doing now, or actually doing in a much bigger fashion than I am now. And, I always think about that. If I ever get reluctant to post something or something, look, I'm clearly not reluctant to post. I post all the time and do videos. Yeah. But there's still sometimes like, well, should I post that? Somebody will think this. And I'm like, so then I go back and I get out of my head and I'm like, okay, dude, this is the goal you want to get to? Who cares what, you think that this person might say? Post. And, yeah.
I talk about this a lot in in the concept of principles, because I think principles and frameworks are the things that can actually keep you on the path to whatever the journey is that you're on. There's a principle and a framework to get there, right?
For sure.
And I talk about the principles of prerequisites, in that there are certain things you need to do in order to have an outcome. You must do it in order to have an outcome. But a lot of people usually believe it to be the reverse. Like I use the example of fitness for it. Mm-hmm. Like most people believe they have to become fit. They have to be fit in order to start acting fit, right? That's actually the reverse.
It's the reverse, yeah.
You have to start acting fit in order to become fit. You have to, what does a fit person act like? Well, they eat well, right?
Right.
They move their bodies. Right. They go to the gym. That's what the action is. So you have to act fit before you can become fit. Right. I was talking about this as well. What do wealthy people do? You have to act like the wealthy do in order to become wealthy. You can't be wealthy and then start acting wealthy.
Right.
You have to act wealthy in order to become wealthy.
Right.
And this principle of prerequisites applies to everything in life. So if your goal is to become a $50 million earner a year, you just learn what the prerequisites are. What does a $50 million a year earner do? Reverse engineer that back, and then just do it. Yeah. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can simply model the behavior that gets you the outcome you desire.
Yeah, I love that.
Most people don't do that.
They don't.
But you are doing that in your life. I love that.
Yeah, and I guess in a way, I'm always, you're probably the same way. I'm just very hard on myself.
You should be.
And as an entrepreneur, I think I was tweeting about this yesterday. It's like 95% of the time you're going to feel like you're not getting anywhere. And then there's like these little, it's like you get these little bumps. You're like
progress.
You have progress. And then it's like boom, boom, boom. But you like, you just don't feel like you're getting anywhere. Like you're putting all this effort and you're doing this. And then it's just like, oh my gosh. But then you have those little bumps. I see you smiling because you know exactly what I'm talking about.
I know exactly where, 100%. I'm right there with you. Well, so the younger version of Derek has gotten a nugget of wisdom shared today.
Yeah.
The present version of Derek has gotten a nugget of wisdom. I don't want the audience to feel left out.
Yeah.
So what nugget of wisdom can you share with the audience to help move the needle for them? Like if you're going to share just one thing with them, what would it be?
Yeah, I would say, man, there's so many things that I'd like to share, but I mean, just, taking action. And I know that is like, okay, everyone says that you have to take action. So do that, but also think bigger. Mm-hmm. Because if you're going to, let's just say you want to make, $5 million a year or $10 million a year, like it's going to take a lot of effort to get to that point. Mm-hmm. Not as much as you think, but it'll be more than you think, kind of thing. So, but when you get there, you'll be like, oh, okay, it wasn't that bad.
Oh, yeah.
But, why not shoot for 100 million or $1 billion?
Oh,
because, and I knew this would come out. So this is what I would tell them. Don't think about just yourself when you think, okay, I'd be good with $1 million. Mm-hmm. You need to think about, I don't know, if you're your church, think about your other organizations that you can contribute to. Think about the effects that you can have on society, on humanity. Mm-hmm. You're not going to be able to do that with $1 million.
Right.
Like, you're not going to be able to, affect something that I want to do is affect financial literacy for kids in, downtown Miami that have never, they don't know what an asset is. Mm-hmm. They think the only way that they can create wealth is through, becoming a sports star or whatever. Mm-hmm. So I would challenge your audience to look at your goals and are they big enough even? Right. Like, are they big enough that when you get to that goal, you're going to be like, okay, like,
right.
Yeah. That's good. Mm-hmm. But I would challenge them to that. And because that leads to you not just thinking about yourself, because you might be fine with $10 million. Mm-hmm. But, these charity organizations and things, they need consistent money, right? And if you really want to make an impact as an entrepreneur, that I think most entrepreneurs do want to make a positive impact, you're going to have to do more than that. Mm-hmm. I mean, you look at all these massively successful guys throughout, the guys in the Gilded Age.
Oh, yeah.
Carnegie, Vanderbilt, those guys. I mean, they built libraries and things. And so whatever the, 2023 version of something like that is.
Exactly.
I think about those things because I generally there's poverty in the world, right? There's a disparity between rich and poor, but there's also a very large disparity of knowledge and information.
Usually those things are usually the same.
Totally.
Because the difference between someone who's poor and someone who's wealthy is usually information. It's
for sure.
It's the knowing the whats and the hows. You don't necessarily have to be the one who's doing the hows, but you have to know what they are.
Right.
And then implement that with the resources you have.
Yeah, and totally. I think and even under that more is just a basis of knowledge, of definitions. What is an asset? What is cash flow? I've talked to potential real estate investors. They're like, okay, this house I'm going to buy or duplex is going to produce, $4,000 a month. So my cash flow is $48,000 a year. And I'm like, that ain't your cash flow.
That's not even
That's
close.
That's not your cash flow. You forgot many things that are included in that.
Yeah.
And so learning those basic definitions of, learning how to look at a P&L, what goes above the line, what goes below the line.
Exactly.
And still that requires a basis of knowledge. So I think about those things a lot. And that would be a really cool impact to make on the world. Think about it. I would love to have people say, Derek, he taught me. I wouldn't be where I'm at today without his information. I wouldn't be that. I think that would be so cool.
I can tell you that in all the things that I've done, it's the ripples that happen when you teach someone else how to do it too.
Yeah.
That matter most.
Yeah.
That's truly been the things that is probably the most transformative for me, is to be able to say, hey, listen, I've had the opportunity to sit down with someone and truly change the trajectory of not just their life, but everyone within their own ecosystem, their family, their friends, their networking, their communities, because I've taught them how to be financially free.
Yeah.
That's been an amazing thing.
Yeah.
Probably the most amazing thing.
And that feels good, right?
100%.
Totally. I posted a video or something about leadership the other day. And one of my district managers that used to work under me, she sent me a message and was like, yeah, I saw your post about leadership. You're still my favorite leader I've ever worked for. I'm a better leader now because of you. And that actually, I got more of a rush and fulfillment from that than I did, when we refied the first deal or when we rolled up, 10 properties in one refi. That was nice, but
talk about the things that motivate us, and significance is a big one for most entrepreneurs. Yeah. And that word gets a little bit taken out of context, but the concept of having an impact on someone and being recognized for that impact, even if it's recognition just from that individual, that creates this sense of significance, and it drives so many of us. Right. So many entrepreneurs, friends that I have, that's what we enjoy. Sure, it's nice to have 6, 7, 8 figures a month coming in. That's nice. Don't get me wrong. It's way better than having 0 come in. Yeah. But that doesn't really move the needle anymore. It's how much impact can I have, and how can I witness that impact, and then also get recognition for it. It doesn't have to be recognition on a public stage or anything like that, but just knowing that person is telling us we've been improved. It just makes us, I don't know. For me, makes me feel so much so great.
I agree with you 100% on that, for sure.
Now, Derek, you had mentioned just a moment ago, there's so many things that you could share. Yeah. I'm curious, how would the audience reach out to you if they have more questions, they want to learn more about what you're doing and how you're doing it? What's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so the best way to get in touch with me, I'm on all social media platforms, not hard to find, at Derek Vickers 885. That's DEREK VICKERS 885. Instagram, Facebook, all of them, TikTok, every single one.
Okay.
And then also you can email me at derek@victoryrealestategroup.com. Victory, that's VICK, my last name.
Okay.
And so you can reach out to me. I'd love to, if you have questions, questions about investing in real estate, mobile home parks, I'd love to help and answer questions. I answer all of my messages personally. I just set up with calls with people and I help them for free. I mean, I love doing that, and I've always loved doing that. So please reach out, and I'd love to help in any way that I can.
Derek, I really appreciate you being on today's podcast and sharing so authentically with us, telling us about your story, your journey, the things that are about to come.
Yeah.
And just all the practical wisdom you've shared. So thank you very much.
Yeah, for sure, Edward. Thank you for having me. It's been a blast, and I hope you get some good reception from your audience. I hope I was able to provide some value for them.
100%, you absolutely did. And with that, that's been another episode of Entrepreneur Unleashed. You, I am certain, have been better for just investing some time with this gentleman. You're going to want to make sure you reach out, and you're absolutely going to 100% want to make sure you stay tuned for that next episode. Once again, my name is Edward Collins, and we'll see you then. Bye for now. Eric, that was awesome. Cool. 100%.